Working Against Racial Bias, Inspire Module, a conversation afterwards. Class was interesting today. We learned about culturally responsive pedagogy, CRP. What is CRP? CRP is the practice of making positive changes on multiple levels. Changes such as instructional techniques that take students' different cultures into the plan, instructional materials that include books for kids to read with different views of the world, student teacher relationships being more open to genuine conversation, a classroom climate of equity and self awareness to improve learning for students, ensuring a higher degree of success for students of various culture groups, providing opportunities for students to think critically about inequities in their own or others' experiences. Well, what are some things that you've learned? Well, a high level of cognitive consciousness is necessary for CRP. For instance, choosing curriculum and reading materials that brings a voice to the minorities in the classroom. Interesting. CRP is culturally responsive pedagogy which works against racial bias, working through our cognitive dissonance to a higher level of cognitive consciousness. Racial bias? We all have identity markers that shape how we see the world. Markers such as race, class, ability, religion, citizenship, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, language. We need to be sensitive to our students' perspectives regarding their identity markers. Is this related to implicit bias? I have heard that we are a product of our experiences. Yes, CRP is absolutely related to implicit bias. We all act on prejudice and stereotypes without intending to do so. Well, can you give me an example of racial bias in the classroom? Yes, racial bias in the classroom happens all the time according to research that has been done. When a teacher punishes a black student with steeper punishments than other students for the same behaviors, with suspension or being expelled from school, that is racial bias in the classroom. Well, that doesn't sound fair. I also learned that black students are 3.5 times more likely to get suspended from school than white students. Yes, racial disparities do exist, and they do affect teachers' perception of their students. Because racial bias is so deeply ingrained in perceptions, they are deeply ingrained in the schools. Color blindness was also addressed. What do you know about it? Well, colorblindness ignores race as an identity marker and marginalizes our differences rather than celebrating them, and makes people of color feel invisible. Well, implicit bias are built into our worldview and just seem natural, but can lead to unfair judgments, such as that is a bad neighborhood, making it so that some perspectives are more privileged than others. Race, class, gender, religion. Why should teachers not use colorblind approach and treat all kids equally? Well, even though there are many perspectives, we're always going to be biased to our own perspective, making it so we must have cognizance toward our own implicit bias. Sometimes when we come from a position of privilege, it blinds us to the struggles of others, and that can sometimes impair our ability to see things from other points of view. That is why every school year I bring in novel units that open the world of another culture into my curriculum. This way, the perspectives of many different cultures get addressed in the lessons I teach. Interesting. I also learned that tests are Eurocentric, based on individuality and competition. Many other cultures value cooperation and collaborative test work. Definitely will be giving more choices and opportunities for test taking. That's a great idea. I can relate this to a very important time in my life when my mom lost the ability to walk when I was a very young kid. I was in the Girl Scouts, and the scout leader asked why she wasn't at the parent meeting. I remember when the troop leader looked at me and told me that if my mom would not show up to the meetings, that I was not allowed to stay in the troop. Well, this sounds intense. What happened? I told the troop leader that my mom could not walk very well anymore and that she could not get up the stairs to get in the meeting. My dad called the leader and settled things, but I was hurt. Sorry this happened. What can you do so that your students feel okay about sharing these kinds of things with you. I'm going to make a conscious effort to be aware of my own implicit bias, and I'm going to be more willing to have the sometimes uncomfortable conversations with students on topics that they really care about. Well, that sounds like it will be a very good classroom atmosphere. Consciousness is assuming one worldview is correct. My commitment to my students is to re examine my behaviors and perceptions toward them. Well, did you learn how to get a better perspective? To know yourself better, learn about school and society, work on interpersonal awareness. This is why I choose to do professional development on the subject. Sounds like a very good way to gain a better perspective so that you could ultimately be an ally for your students. What are you going to take back to the classroom? I'm going to try to understand the world through the eyes of my students, continue to bring in novel units that study different cultures, and most definitely be cognizant of my personal biases and make sure that I am ready, really listening to my students so that they know that it is important for their voice to be heard. Sounds like a great start. Want to see a picture of my class? Sure. This is a picture of my wonderful class. Empathy is about standing in someone else's shoes, feeling with his or her heart, seeing with his or her eyes. Not only is empathy hard to outsource and automate, but it makes the world a better place. Daniel H. Pink. Video made by Christine Coven for ITI 670, MAE program, National University.